What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to go over this project I did for the Builders Challenge Season 10. It's got a metal base, so there's some welding in there, something I usually don't do, but I'm excited to further my skills in, and also use slabs for the top with a bunch of crazy angles. I may have possibly messed this up along the way and had to fix it. Stay tuned to see what I'm talking about.
To start out, I went out in the backyard and picked out a couple tulip poplar slabs that I've had drying out there. I got them from Charles and Not Had Custom Sawing a few years back, and they're finally ready to use. I cut them down to rough size using a combination of my track saw and my hand saw. The track saw didn't go quite deep enough, so I just finished them off by hand. These slabs were pretty warped, as most are when air dried, so I got my flattening sled out and rails, shimmed up the slabs, and got to flattening. I do have a video of this process and I'll link it down below for you guys to check out if you're interested. I always apply a little paste wax to the bed and the rails. It makes everything slide much better. I set my router to take off about an 1/8 inch at a time. I get a ton of questions asking which bit I used for this. I used the Astra-coated Whiteside 6220 surfacing bit from Bits & Bits Company. I will leave a link to it as well as a coupon code that will save you a little bit of money on your entire order off the Bits & Bits website in the description below. This process does take quite a while and is pretty messy, but luckily I only had to flatten one side, and I'll show you why in a minute. I ran over to my day job at Bidwell Wood Company, where they are nice enough to let me use the shop on my days off. I decided to make a base out of metal on this one and hone my welding skills. I started off by cutting all the pieces out on the bandsaw. It was kind of a challenge to figure out the angles of this one, but I eventually got it. Once I had all the pieces cut, I took them over to the bench and used an angle grinder to bevel all the edges. This allows a place for the weld to lay and gives you a nicer joint. I prefer welding sleeves over a welding jacket, especially when it's hot, but maybe this winter I might switch over to a jacket, but for now, I'll stick with these. I also use two different kinds of glove, a MIG on my left hand and a TIG glove on the right. You can feel a lot more in the TIG glove, and the MIG glove keeps the heat off your hand. As I said, I'm honing my welding skills. I actually just started welding a couple months ago, and so far it's been really fun and challenging, as it always is learning a new skill along the way. I definitely plan to be including this in more projects, so hope you guys like welding content. Just like with sanding wood projects, grinding the welds is probably my least favorite part, but when done well, it makes the final product a lot nicer. So we have this giant monster old Oliver 24-inch planer at work with a helical head, and this is the reason I only had to flatten one side. This thing is a beast, and it made quick work of flattening the other side, bringing them to final thickness. Now my initial thought was to use the live edge on this, but the way they're flared out at the end, it just wasn't going to work, so I decided to cut them down with the big track saw. Now it's time to really cheat. We have a big 52-inch wide belt at work, and it's a time saver, and let me tell you, it is named appropriately. I changed out the 36 grit that was in there we were flattening with before and switched it to a 120 grit. That way I could bring the slabs to an almost finished state. Check out the size of this 10 horsepower Grizzly dust collector. Crazy. Okay, back to my shop. I needed to do something about all these knots and voids that were in the slabs, and filling them with epoxy is a great way to make the surface smooth and keep all the character as well. I like to use the Moss Epoxy's LV with slow hardener. It's a little bit thinner and runs nicely down into the cracks. This looked really cool around all the figure that there were in these slabs. While the epoxy was curing, I ran back over to my work and finished up the base by adding some standoffs and flat bar that would be used to attach the top. To do the flat bar, I was actually just out of 1/8" sheets, and I used the big shear to do that. Then I moved over to the punch press to punch some elongated holes to allow for wood movement. And back to my shop. I used some acetone to clean the base before painting it. I planned to have this thing powder coated, but I just ran out of time, and I may have it done in the future anyway. It's just a lot more durable than spray paint, but this works. Now that the slabs were planed down, my track saw had no problem cutting all the way through. I cut the pieces down to final size, and then I cut 45-degree angles on them for the miters. Once that was done, I sanded all the epoxy down flush. I wanted to add a chamfer to the front of the console, so I used my table saw, set the blade to 45 degrees, and then ran the fronts of all the slabs through. I've learned that pre-sanding along the way is your friend. I sanded all the inside faces to final grit before I assembled it. It's just a lot easier to do that rather than trying to get into the corners after it's assembled. I set my saw blade to 1/4 inch to cut the rabbet in the back side of the panels to accept the back panel. I also made 2 passes so the slot was 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. Using my domino, I set it to 45 degrees to cut quite a few mortises into each slab, about every other inch or so, just to ensure I had plenty of glue surface and strength. I set the domino to the middle setting so it had a little bit more play side to side. Since there were so many, I've learned along the way that it's very hard to get them lined up exactly when you use the tight setting. Time for a dry fit. Everything looks good, or so I thought. I always try to add tape along the inside of glue joints to prevent glue from getting on the faces. It's much easier to peel the tape than sand or scrape the glue later. I'm also trying out something new I learned from Designs by Donnie. Instead of tape, apply some paste wax to your clamps and the glue peels right off. I didn't show it, but it did work.
Well, things don't always go as planned. I got this thing put together, took the clamps off, and realized there's some huge gaps. I went back and checked my cutoffs, and it turns out that my blade was not exactly 45 degrees, so all the insides are tight, the outsides have gaps. I could fill it, but you'd be able to see it, and I wouldn't be happy with that, so I'm actually going to cut this thing all the way back apart and kind of start over. So I'll kind of speed through that for you guys, don't have to watch the whole thing, and get back to this point. Welcome back. Everything's good now. Got all the angles at the right angle, and it's all glued together with minimal gaps. I still need to fill a little bit, but mostly good. I'm gonna start taking this tape off and get this thing sanded and filled. Some cleanup to do. Probably should have peeled the tape when the glue was still wet. Oops.
It's final sand time, everybody's favorite part of the whole process. I know sanding can be riveting, but the Mercaderos does make it much better and much more enjoyable. Highly recommend. To attach the base to the top, I use threaded inserts. I've learned along the way that a Forstner bit to drill these holes is much better than a regular drill bit because it doesn't walk and it leaves a much cleaner cut. I also add CA to the inserts when I install them. That just ensures that they stay there over time. I hand sanded all the edges just to make them a little less sharp and fix any minor dings. So I did still have some small gaps, but I learned this trick that I'm pretty sure came from the Wood Whisperer. It is to use the shaft of a screwdriver and kind of close the gap to form the corners together. It worked great. I used Rubio Monocoat Pure on this one. I'm always a fan of this product because it leaves a great natural looking finish and it's easy to apply. Just wipe it on with a rag or a spreader where applicable on flat surfaces, and then I buff it in using a terry cloth bonnet. Once it was all finished, I could attach the base. The last thing I needed to do was make the back panel. I just used some 1/4-inch ply, cut it to size, and then painted it black to match the base and contrast with the wood. I attached the back panel with Titebond Quick and Thick and some brad nails. This glue dries clear and it doesn't run, so it was perfect for this application. I really enjoyed this build, learning new skills along the way, fixing mistakes, and just trying out something that I don't really do. I just can't get over the character and figure in this tulip poplar. It looks amazing.
That wraps up this build. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below, and check out this video right here. Oh, and also subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you on the next one.